A lonely Florida highway stretching endlessly beneath a blistering sun. The silence is broken only by the rumble of engines and the whispers of fear. Along this road walks a woman armed with a pistol and a past carved from violence and betrayal. Her name would one day become a chilling echo in true crime history, whispered in courtrooms, dissected in documentaries, and remembered as both a tragedy and a nightmare. Was she a broken soul, scarred from a lifetime of abuse, finally striking back at the world that tormented her? Or was she a calculating predator, stalking men with the promise of comfort only to leave them lifeless by the roadside? Tonight, we plunge headfirst into the fractured and haunting world of Aileen Wuornos, forever branded by the press as the Damsel of Death. Aileen Wuornos is not just another name on death row. Her story is a haunting paradox that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about violence, victimhood, and survival. She was a woman broken by childhood trauma, abandoned by family, scarred by abuse, and pushed to the absolute edge of society. For years, she drifted like a ghost on America's highways, surviving only by selling her body and hiding her pain. But one day, the line she balanced on collapsed. What happened next would horrify even seasoned investigators. Aileen crossed from desperate survival into a string of murders that shocked the world and forever etched her name into true crime history. To some, she was a woman finally striking back against men who preyed upon her. To others, she was a predator, cloaked in the mask of victimhood, unleashing an insatiable darkness that had always lived inside her. And here's the chilling question I'll put to you. If you had met Aileen on the side of the road, a tired woman with haunted eyes asking for a ride, would you have stopped? Would you have seen her as a victim, someone to help, or sensed the storm of violence waiting beneath the surface? The question that has lingered for decades is not simply what Aileen did, but what her life represents. Vengeance, tragedy, or the chilling reminder that even the broken can become the most dangerous of all. Born in 1956 in Michigan, Aileen never had a chance at a normal life. Her father, a convicted pedophile, vanished before she ever knew him and would later hang himself in prison. Her mother abandoned her at just 6 months old, leaving both Aileen and her brother to the care of their grandparents. Those grandparents, far from offering safety, were alcoholics who subjected her to constant violence and humiliation. By the age of 11, Aileen was already smoking, drinking, and experimenting with drugs. She endured repeated sexual abuse, allegedly even from family members, and by 14 she became pregnant after being raped by a friend of her grandfather. The baby was given up for adoption, and Aileen was forced out of the house soon after. Her teenage years were defined by rejection. She was bullied mercilessly in school for her appearance and erratic behavior, earning the nickname Lee and Cigarette Pig because she would sell sexual favors for loose change or cigarettes behind the school. When her grandfather finally threw her out, she became homeless and unwanted. She built makeshift shelters in the woods, scavenged food from trash cans, and wandered from place to place in the Michigan cold. The only way she could secure food, alcohol, or a ride was through prostitution, a grim trade she began long before adulthood. By 15 and 16, she was not only trading her body for survival, but clinging desperately to fleeting encounters as substitutes for affection and stability. These years shaped the person Aileen would become, hardened, angry, desperate, and yet still yearning for connection. Her early life was not just a struggle. It was a crucible of abandonment and abuse that forged the dangerous path she would follow into adulthood. Between 1989 and 1990, Florida's highways turned into hunting grounds of horror. One by one, men were found shot with the same .22 caliber pistol, their bodies dumped along desolate roadsides. These weren't faceless victims. They were husbands, workers, fathers, middle-aged men whose final mistake was picking up a hitchhiking sex worker named Aileen Wuornos. To the world, she said it was self-defense, that every trigger pull was an act of survival against attempted rape. But prosecutors painted her as a merciless predator, a woman who had perfected the art of deception. She would flash a smile, promise intimacy, and then, once trust was secured, draw her gun without hesitation. This wasn't panic, they argued. This was a ritual of control and slaughter. Witnesses described her as cold, almost gleeful when recounting the killings, and investigators uncovered evidence suggesting she pawned her victims' belongings for quick cash, revealing greed and calculation behind the bloodshed. Her victims included Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner with a violent past; David Spears, a construction worker left naked on the roadside; Charles Carskadden, a young man engaged to be married; Peter Seams, whose car Aileen and her lover, Tyria Moore, a hotel maid she had been romantically involved with for years, crashed and abandoned; Troy Burris, a delivery man who never made it home; Charles Humphreys, a retired Air Force officer and police chief; and Walter Antonio, a trucker found shot multiple times. Each man died in eerily similar circumstances, each story feeding the image of Wuornos not as a desperate drifter, but as a highway executioner who reveled in the chaos she created. The truth, buried somewhere between those gunshots and the silence that followed. But one fact became impossible to ignore. Aileen Wuornos wasn't just striking back, she was hunting. In 1991, police finally closed in, but not through brute force, through betrayal. Aileen was undone by the one person she trusted most, her lover and companion, Tyria Moore. When investigators tracked Moore down through leads from pawnshop records, witness statements, and tips that eventually traced her to Scranton, Pennsylvania, they offered her a deal: cooperate or risk being dragged into the murders herself. Terrified, Tyria agreed. Police set her up in a hotel, wired the phones, and had her call Aileen again and again. On those recorded calls, Tyria begged Aileen to clear her name, pleading that she would be arrested unless Aileen told the truth. Believing her lover's tears and desperate voice, Aileen finally cracked. She confessed, not to police, but to Tyria, thinking she was saving her from prison. In reality, every word was being taped, sealing her fate. The betrayal was devastating, but it was also decisive. With Tyria's cooperation and Aileen's own confession, prosecutors built an airtight case. The woman who once stalked highways with a gun now sat shackled in court, branded not as a victim, but as one of America's first female serial killers. Her trial became a media circus. Prosecutors laid out graphic evidence of each killing, tying together ballistics, pawn slips, and eyewitnesses. The defense argued self-defense, painting Wuornos as a lifelong victim of male violence. But the jury saw cold calculation instead of desperation. In 1992, she was convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to death, her name cemented in history as a chilling example of America's justice system confronting its first high-profile female serial killer. Aileen's days behind bars only deepened the contradictions of her life. In prison, she swung between calm reflection and explosive outbursts. She spoke to journalists, sometimes painting herself as a victim of a cruel world, other times raging that she killed for revenge or hatred. Guards and fellow inmates described her as volatile, paranoid, and often convinced that the prison system was plotting to torture her. Her relationship with Tyria Moore was severed by betrayal, leaving her isolated. Instead, she wrote long letters, gave bizarre interviews, and spoke openly about her distrust of everyone around her. At times, she seemed to embrace her fate, claiming she wanted to die to escape the corruption she believed surrounded her. Other times, she lashed out, cursing the courts, her lawyers, and even society itself. What made Aileen Wuornos so compelling and terrifying was this duality that followed her even in confinement. On one side, a woman who had suffered a lifetime of abuse, rape, and rejection. On the other, a remorseless killer who claimed the lives of 7 men and showed no remorse as execution drew nearer. Was she defending herself? Or was she driven by greed, hatred, and a desire for control? The answer may lie in the shadows of her mind, where trauma and rage blurred into something lethal. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos spent her final 24 hours in a Stark, Florida prison cell, refusing her last meal beyond a simple cup of coffee. Guards described her as eerily calm, though she muttered endlessly about conspiracies, satellites, and government plots she believed were tormenting her. In those hours, she granted no apologies, no pleas for mercy, only venom and rage. She never once acknowledged the devastation she had caused, never expressed sorrow for the men she executed or the families shattered by her actions. Instead, she clung to wild accusations and paranoid delusions, spitting bitterness at a world she had chosen to scar. When the time came, she was led to the execution chamber. Witnesses recalled the cold detachment on her face as she was strapped to the gurney and injected with the lethal cocktail. Her final words were chilling and bizarre: "I'll be back, with Jesus." Even in her last breath, she radiated hostility, remembered not as a misunderstood woman, but as a ruthless killer who refused to show humanity until the end. Her story has been retold in documentaries, books, and the Oscar-winning film Monster. But no matter how it's framed, one fact remains crystal clear. Wuornos chose the path of blood, destruction, and hatred. A predator until the end, hidden behind the face of a broken woman, and proof that evil is not always born, but sometimes chosen. As you think about Aileen Wuornos, the so-called Damsel of Death, strip away the excuses and the pity. She was not a tragic heroine, but a ruthless predator who stalked men, gunned them down, and showed no remorse. Her story is not one of redemption, but of blood and betrayal. A grim reminder that evil can wear a human face and that sometimes the darkness is exactly what it seems. Would you have believed her cries of self-defense, or seen through the mask to the predator beneath?